Welcome, explorers. Fasten your taste bud, folks. This is the Flavor Expedition, and we're ready to embark on an incredible journey through the world of flavors. We're diving into the depths of food trends, exploring exotic taste, and navigating the ever-evolving food and beverage industry. Buckle up as we take off to explore the delicious, the daring, and the downright delightful dishes from across the globe. We are ready to set your palates on flavor-packed adventure, so let's get rolling. Hey guys, welcome back. This is Dan Fallacy, your co-host on the Flavor Expedition with the other co-host, Chase O'Kane. Hey Chase, say hello.
Hello, Dan. How are you, sir? Pleasure to be here with you today. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. I feel like it's been a really long time since we've just had a good old-fashioned conversation and talked about the trends, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. And we're going to be exploring something just kind of like the good old days when we just talked about
the good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. For some reason, that just kind of fits this particular subject, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think you're exactly right. I mean, and to your point, it feels like a while since it's been just you and me on here. So it's we love our guests, but it's nice to sometimes just sit down and have a conversation with your co-host with the most, Mr. Dan Policy. But yeah, talking about the good old days, today we want to bring I suppose it's something of a macro trend into light here, and kind of in a little bit of contrast to usually we get a little bit granular on things. We're staying 10,000 feet. We're talking about something that seems pervasive. We're talking about new stuff.
Yeah, and it is a macro trend, but it's almost like the macro, and it can be kind of confusing, right? Because it's a trend within itself.
What do you mean when you say that? Tell me more.
Well, I mean, you think about Newstalgia, right? Nostalgia, which is what it's a play off of, but we want nostalgia. So I think it's kind of a trend within itself, and it's being recognized, and it's actually been given some credence, and it's being positioned as a trend itself, which quite honestly, it's kind of been there the whole time.
Yeah, it's something, to your point, it's kind of just a relabeling of nostalgia with a very minor tweak, and I suppose that's the whole point of the trend itself, is, taking something that feels familiar and then applying some slight change to make a familiar flavor or format or just something that you already know and associate and have an anchor of relationship with, and then taking it and just doing just enough of a small twist on it to where it's new. It's both nostalgic and it's new. Hence the name Newstalgia. So, I think that's a decent description of it. I mean, we'll obviously talk about it in a bit further detail as to, what that might look like, how that might manifest on menus or even, in retail. But without going too far into it, for any new listeners, we have to talk a little bit about our format. The way that we generally talk through any of our trends is from a bit of a expedition through time. It wouldn't be the Flavor Expedition if we didn't take you on a bit of a journey. And so that is an expedition through time usually. So we like to speak a little bit about the past, where we kind of give a little bit of historical context as to why the trend is important. Then we'll talk a bit about present and today, how it's manifesting on menus or in retail, like I was saying. And then we'll look to the future and say, what do we see on the horizon for this trend as it pertains to any and all sides of the F&B industry. So that's where we're going. That's how we're thinking. We're gonna dive into that. So Dan, before we jump into anything, am I missing anything? Is there any more housekeeping that we need to do?
No. I think we're looking good. We're just gonna kind of jump into this. This is a fun topic. It's really something I know as innovation R&D culinary chefs. As consultants, we reflect on this a lot. We've had a lot of conversations on many products around this, right? And it's really that nostalgic perspective. We've both shared this is how it's kind of just doing a little tweak to something that we remember. And it seems that as much as we hate talking about it, it seems like this kind of came back during COVID. Really, it's kind of like that yearning for more comfort foods with uncertain times. People want to kind of lean back into what they knew or heard or believed to be better, like historical comfort foods that get revisited with little modern twists. I think there's a ton of comfort foods and historical
Yeah.
nostalgic things we can look at.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think of if we're going to go ahead and jump into it and into what the past is as it pertains to nostalgia. I mean, hey, we all have done it, especially as culinarians, as people who love food. Everyone looks at their grandma's meatloaf or cookies or mac and
Mm-hmm.
cheese or whatever it is, and you go, nothing was better than my grandma's.
Yeah.
And you know that your grandma probably thought the exact same thing of her own grandmas, and probably her own grandma before that and before that and before that. And I think there's just something to be said about the fact that we will always look to the past as what we really view as comfort. And I think you said it pretty
Yeah.
well right there, Dan. Of comfort foods are really where we develop our love for food and our love for, as chefs, for cooking. And it's a tale as old as time, really. I mean, we always want to be rooted in something that we
Okay. Now
know and
you got
love.
an
And
earworm. You got an
what's
earworm on
that?
me. Tale as told old as time. Some Disney song just popped up in
Oh
my head.
yeah, right. Sorry, my bad. I hope I didn't get any copyright claims right there.
But I was going to ask you this: is there, because you mentioned your grandma thing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
assuming all grandmas cook, right? I have a favorite reflection or memory that my
Yeah,
grandma always cooked for me, and it's the
sure.
most simplest thing. Do you have something before I tell what mine is?
Oh man, mine is hilarious. I'll let you tell yours if yours is
Oh,
a good story. Mine is not it's a super funny story, but my grandma, she didn't love cooking, so we'll talk about
okay.
that in a minute.
I don't know how well my grandma was for cooking, but what she always did was boil hot dogs. So
Oh,
they were
sure.
never grilled.
Yeah,
They were never put in a microwave because, well, she didn't grow up with a microwave,
sure. Sure.
right? So I often will just put on a pan, and simmer some hot dogs in water. And
That's so
every time
funny.
I do that, it's always this memory of my grandmother. Now I lost her
Right.
when I was rather young, so
Mhm.
that's kind of like this real formidable thing that's stuck in my head is what she did for me
Mhm.
was these boiled hot dogs. I mean, boiling an emulsified meat casing product isn't all that exciting or delightful,
Sure.
but there's something about it as a kid that I'm like, man, a boiled hot dog, if I pass one on the street or steamed, on a hot dog cart, I'm like,
Yeah.
grandma, right?
I love it. And, I think that it ties back exactly what we were saying, right? Food is one of the few things, I think, along with music and even movies, that as soon as you experience something that it triggers
Yeah.
exactly where you were, who you were with, fun times, good times, or even just feelings. For me, this is so funny. My grandma, if she listens to this, she's gonna be very upset that I told her this secret.
Oh,
It's so my grandma growing up, she used to have this 4 cheese mashed potatoes that she would bring to every family gathering, and it was kind of like known as her dish that she would bring. And one time, she and we went to the store prior to a family gathering. I was up visiting her, and so I was helping her get ready for this kind of barbecue that we were gonna have
mm.
at my parents' house. And she grabbed a few packs of Idahoan 4 cheese mashed potatoes, and she looked at me and said, "Don't tell anybody about this."
It was packaged all along.
It was packaged all along. All she had to do was boil some water and add in her dehydrated potatoes. And it's so funny because very similarly, my wife and I just made a packet of that, and I'm not joking, yesterday. And I kept saying,
Oh,
that's grandma's secret stuff. But it's just
funny.
such a funny thing. To your point, it's,
Well,
you
shout
think of
out
your
to
grandma's thing.
potatoes and shout out to Chef RJ Harvey and all the spud
Yeah,
work, right, that they do.
yeah.
I know
No,
he's not a
absolutely.
brand, he's an ambassador of potatoes, but yeah, it's funny. Like, it even goes back to there's some really cool things on social media with very nostalgic recipe making. One particular, I guess, influencer, if you want to call him that, and he makes recipes from like the 1920s and the 1930s and 50s, and they're like,
Sure.
some of them are horrible, but some of
Hmm.
them are that turn out really well are made with dehydrated dairy, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Dehydrated eggs. So you think about like the lack of refrigeration and things that they didn't have, right, for fresh
Yeah.
ingredients that we take for granted today. And it's because it was a necessity to store and ship, and price wise, I'm sure the cost of fresh eggs was a heck of a lot more expensive than dehydrated egg.
Hmm.
Back in the depression days. So, but some of these recipes turn out incredibly well. Some of them are abominations, but
Well, I mean, hey, it's one of those classic cases. We've talked about it throughout the entire sort of longevity of this podcast so far. Is looking to the past. Cuisines have changed so much, and
yeah.
as much as people like to say that the past is always better, the past is always better. There's something to be said about the progress and change and development of flavors and the way that people think it in the present day. You know, I always thought it was very funny. A long time ago, I remember being on YouTube and there was this recording. It was about one of the earliest songs known to human kind, and the song was all about the old days being better. And I
Mm.
thought, how funny is that? That one of the oldest songs in all recorded history is still about, man, you should have known how good the old days were. And it's just
Yeah.
a classic case of we'll always think of when we were younger, times were better. And
Yeah.
that's how it just continues to go. And we'll always be
Yeah.
anchored in what it was like to be a kid and know those feelings. And now that we're in the present, we can view life through that lens and take that sort of experience that we have into an understanding of what flavors can be and what food can be.
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
decent time for us to transition into kind of the present of what
Yeah.
nostalgia
Yeah, it's
is.
time to step into the current days. I think it's really interesting because nostalgia, as it's being identified, is reshaping the food industry on a daily basis. It's influencing
Mm-hmm.
menu development, product innovation, different marketing strategies. Sometimes you see old fashioned, kind of like colors or even those approaches that were used at, or ways to laugh at things, right? Restaurants and retailers are always looking for ways to incorporate that into LTOs, or even create an entire, operation around that kind of thing. So I know you had just recently tasted something that was nostalgic that's being launched.
Oh yes, this is true. I have a lot of really, pertinent examples in this one, but one that really stands out that I even posted about on LinkedIn yesterday because I was so kind of amped up about it, was Taco Bell releasing their new Cheez-It LTOs, both a tostada that's on a enormous, I think it's 16 times larger than your average Cheez-It,
It's
as
not hard to
well
do
as,
though.
yeah,
Jesus
it's
are
pretty good
tiny.
size.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. And then they also have if I'm not mistaken, it's like a crunch wrap. And, it's just a classic case of, first off, I think that is absolutely brilliant. Not really changing your format of what you're delivering so much as
Mhm.
you're just changing one ingredient. You're taking out a crunchy tortilla and putting in something else that people already know, already recognize, already understand, and love from being a kid, have probably eaten since they were a kid, and
Yeah.
now as adults probably feed to their own children and have something that they go, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about this. I have friends that aren't even interested in food that have been talking to me about this for months
Oh wow.
leading
Yeah.
up to it.
Well, I say
Um,
Yearns
yeah,
is kind of taking a page from themselves, because they did that with the Doritos. You know,
Doritos Locos Taco.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I had the fortunate opportunity to be at their corporate office when they were launching that, and
Mm-hmm.
the hype they built up around that. I got to taste one made by
Yeah.
their chefs prior to release date, and I love Doritos, and I think, to your point earlier, it's very generational. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
For sure.
Doritos is a Gen X treat. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think it covers more than that, but I think it's very at its core consumed by Gen Xers a lot. That's my group.
Yeah.
Cheez-Its, I believe, are a little bit more leaning towards your age group.
Yeah, millennials, absolutely, for sure.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. Like they keep finding. It's not
And it's
hard, right? Because there's a lot of examples to play from, but find the right one.
Yeah, and I think that it really just comes down to, consumer understanding. A lot of times a lot of organizations out there do a lot of serious research, do a lot of data aggregation, and then they outline a couple of trends that are sometimes already very well explored and already kind of saturated within the market, and they, release these. I don't want to say lackluster or less interesting, but they release LTOs that sometimes just don't hit as hard, and it's because, well, you're not doing anything to really change too much, and if other places have already kind of done what you're doing, well, how much are you changing aside from what you currently offer rather than what is currently offered within the market? I think Taco Bell offering something that people know in retail and have a great relationship with in retail, but offering a totally and completely new experience for all of their customers without
Mm-hmm.
really changing too much. It's just it's everything that you would hope for. I mean, especially we've talked about it quite a bit, but as chefs, especially in the innovation space, a lot of what we do is how do we take something that people fundamentally understand, recognize, and enjoy and make a minor enough tweak that it feels major and it feels substantial and it's
Yep.
still going to be understood and delicious.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you can do things like that, you're going to be successful.
Yeah. Innovation is not reinventing the wheel. It's doing something slightly different to it. But I think you also said something really brilliant was retail. So Taco Bell's done it twice,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to go back to that captured moment of a branded snack and now play off of that nostalgia
Yep.
and make it new and put it into a format that works. It's a flavor, right? It was a flavor and a textural component with the Doritos, because it was literally a reformulated corn tortilla. And then they've done the same here. They've actually created a large format Cheez It, right? And topped
Yeah,
it.
that's
So I
exactly
think
right.
there's a lot to be said about, if I was a QSR, I would be exploring, and I wanted to play that way. I'd be looking at those nostalgic brands. Go back to some of those flavors. I mean, I know there was kind of like a buzz a while back. My brother was the biggest cereal eater ever. Like, and even to this day, the guy has boxes of cereal in his kitchen, and he's so proud whenever I've hey, look what I got! I just found this Count Dracula. I'm like, oh my
Count
god,
Chocula, you
or
mean?
Count Chocula. Yeah, see, that's
Come
I'm not
on
even.
now.
He's the guy who he keeps them coming back to their when they do those reruns.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
those are
Oh,
those
yeah.
moments that they capture. Those people that are just stuck in those pleasure moments of snacks.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, it reminds you of a simpler time, an innocent time. And classically, humans think of the past as often a better time. And I mean, you're talking about cereal, and I think that's such it just sparked something in my brain. But you think about, like what Christina Tosi has managed to do with Milk Bar,
Oh yeah,
right? She made cereal milk the biggest thing in America, and now Milk Bar went from one location in Manhattan to
yeah.
taking over Manhattan, and now you can find
Oh,
their
the
products
retail.
in all kinds of retail stores.
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah, yeah.
and they're all based on childhood snack and treats and sweets, and
Mm-hmm.
once again, it's not cheap. It's definitely not made for you to buy for your kids for the most part. I mean, I don't know if you make how much money you make, but it's not something I'm going to buy for my son. And it's just a classic case of those things are very certainly made for adults.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, it's made for adults on a lot of levels. So
Yeah.
for whether it's the memory banks of muscle memory of flavor or texture,
Mm,
just the moment to reflect on something that they had as a child, right? So
that's right.
hey, life is tough. There's a lot of reasons for people to choose things to eat, right?
Hmm.
I mean, just the other night, my fridge is loaded with a whole bunch of cooked prepared proteins, and for some reason, it's just like, you know what? I want fish and chips. I'm just going to get
Yeah.
some of those frozen fish battered fillets and put it in the oven, and that's what hit the spot. So, people go for what they want to go for whatever reason. And I think there's, a moment of comfort in that, whether it's savory or sweet. There's something that they love, like the hot dog, like grandma makes, right? I mean, it's just totally always brings me back, and my mother was a great, great cook. Actually, she was a really good baker in a lot of ways. And, if I had to think about one thing she made, she figured out or got a recipe from somebody. And this is a treat that's no longer available. It was like a hostess treat. It was called the banana flip. So
I've never heard of that.
it was like a Genoise sponge cake folded in half, almost like a taco, but
Okay.
filled with a like light, fluffy banana flavored buttercream.
Huh. Interesting.
And it was all the rage in the 70s and 80s. I mean, the banana flip was available, shelf stable, cake treat kind of thing. And she figured that one out, and I think I ate the whole sheet pan myself.
Well, there you go. I mean, it's just such a funny thing, right? Like I will continue to harp on it, but food is such an interesting way to look to the past and think towards the future. I saw a couple of different studies. One was from Simrise, but they had a study that said 76% of 22 to 55-year-olds love things that remind them of their past when eating. Puratos also had a study of 20,000 people in over 50 countries, and it said 73% of people like to have something familiar as an element whenever they're trying something new while eating. So, when having 70% or more of people kind of align with anything, you're generally going to be pretty good on betting on that side. So, it's just a classic case of people want what they know.
Yep.
And people will always, kind of be a bit more averse for taking risks and trying something completely and totally new.
Yeah.
So trying to find ways to, give an anchor of relatability while also twisting and turning something just enough is always going to be, a successful way to go about it. You think about the French laundry. What's the most popular item that made the French laundry? It's the cornet, right? It looks like a teeny tiny little ice cream cone, but instead of it being ice cream in a waffle cone, it's a sesame seed tuile with a red onion creme fraiche, salmon tartare, and a chive on top. It reminds you of being a kid, reminds you of a little ice cream cone. Definitely a bit more elegant.
Fanciful but nostalgic, right? So that's interesting. Menu development or product innovation, it can go into a lot of different ways, obviously reflecting back, but sometimes even today, it's taking that product and maybe it's taking the same thing and using better for you ingredients, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
So that's still keeping at the core of what that item is, but using something like without fructose corn syrup, or something else that's going to be a different way. Not only do you appeal to today's new consumer, but you actually are giving them something that's better for you or better for the planet, or just something that is going to resonate with today's consumer that's looking for things that are going to have that nostalgic feel, but also, be a little bit more healthier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you think about, were you of the, I don't want to
go ahead
anything about how old you are, but do you remember when Coke tried to rebrand as New Coke?
Of course. Yeah.
Right. And, that is to this day viewed as one of the worst marketing mishaps and failures that has ever happened. And one of the big reasons for that is because Coke has always been viewed as this classic heritage brand. I mean, it's been around forever. I can't remember exactly when it was first started, but when they tried to become this new, totally different Coke that was hip and young, it went over horribly because people were like, no, we don't want Coke to be new. We want Coke to be Coke. And it's just that classic, people don't want something totally new. They
Well,
want what they
you
know
know,
and
and it took
love,
them a
and
long
they want a
time.
new version. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it took them a long time to finally say, okay, we're going to have the classic, but now we're going to have some other flavors. I want to say in the last
Sure.
year, they did some fun things, you know, more fruit flavored, more trendy. They got like a
Mhm.
mango Coke, a zesty blood orange Coke. Um, my favorite, I would do this when I was traveling, hit the Delta Club and make a Coke with an espresso in it. And
I was
they,
gonna say, yeah, the coffee Coca-Cola,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, they got a coffee Coke, a cinnamon Coke, of course the classic cherry Coke, right? And vanilla. But
Mhm.
you know, yeah, they've kind of stretched the boundaries a bit, but yeah, something
Mhm.
about being, you know, the classic dish. Don't mess with the classic. Keep that and then expand off it. What the platform, right?
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
new offerings.
Yeah.
So
It's a building process.
yeah, yeah. Well, and people want to go out and try new things all the time. So it's sometimes it's a gamble, but you got to go out there and try it.
Fair enough. And if
Yeah.
we think about that, what do you think, the future of nostalgia might hold?
Good question. You know, I think there's a lot of things to understand. You know, looking at different ways of maybe, you know, more like I mentioned before, better for you ingredients or health conscious variants. Right. I think
Mm,
there's a lot of more understanding of ingredients than ever before. Even myself
sure.
personally, like, you know, gut health things and vitamin B12 and, you know, so all these things that can benefit and help you. So I think that might be just slight tweaks. Hey, just make it better, you know, slightly make it better for you. And
Sure.
that in general will spur people because, hey, now I can eat something that I used to love and it's better for me. You know, so
Sure.
I see that as something that's going to be pushing the forwardness on doing that kind of stuff in restaurants for sure, if not even retail.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that we're moving towards a much more health-centric and informed culture as far as eating is concerned. People don't want to sacrifice what they already know and love. They just want to
Yeah.
feel a little bit better for it by and large. One of the things that kind of comes to mind for me is the fact that, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which is, of course, the next generation after Gen Z, they have lived a very different life than every other generation before them.
Yeah.
As a millennial, I remember before cell phones. I remember when, we had landlines in the house. I was talking to, one of my very young family members the other day, and I was trying to explain to her that we used to only have one phone in the house, and there was no such thing as cell phones, and that if you were on the computer and someone called your house, you had to get off of the computer to talk to that
Yes, you
person. She
did.
thought I was telling a crazy joke or a story, and I was trying to trick her. And I was like, this is not science fiction. This is real life. But, you think about Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and they've lived through some interesting things already, right? They've lived through a pandemic. They've always known a digital world and the internet, a much more globalized world. And they've also lived through a large amount of kind of social, political, and climate based upheaval in many ways. It's fair to say that tensions have been fairly high in America in the political landscape. We're not going to get into that. But, as it pertains to life in the last 8-10 years.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say there's also, you know, one more thing that I don't want to forget about and bring up is, you know, this whole nostalgia piece that another we gave Yum a lot of props, but you know what? McDonald's just launched this whole Grandma McFlurry. I mean,
They did. Why
right?
did we not talk about that? That's a great point. The Grandma McFlurry, the butterscotch McFlurry. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the hard candies that are in grandma's purse or pocket all the
Uh huh.
time. And so even kids that didn't get to experience that, you know, like you
Hmm.
said, your niece or nephew that's thought you were joshing them about the internet and telephones, all of a
Yeah.
sudden like, what are you talking about? You know, it's happening
Yeah.
on a lot of different levels, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe we forgot about the Grandma McFlurry. We were talking about grandmas and we didn't bring up the Grandma McFlurry with it inspired by Werther's originals from Grandma. That's so
Yeah.
funny.
Well, you
Uh,
know, and the Grandma McFlurry is just another one of those grows underneath the macro of nostalgia, you know. And
sure, absolutely.
so that's a great example of where people can take this in the future. You know, they can literally take an ingredient or a component like a hard candy and crush it, blend it
Yeah,
into a classic that they're already known for, right?
yeah.
and all of a sudden it becomes a whole nother new thing. So
Oh, absolutely. I mean, hey, I think to your point, everyone thinks of their grandma or grandpa with different things. I always think of eating Andy's candies, Andy's mints,
yeah,
right? The
yeah,
little like chocolate mint
the
with
layered,
my grandpa.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but no, I mean, just once again coming back to this Gen Z, Gen Alpha thing, you also think about the fact that there are less families eating around a dining table every night,
sure,
right? There's more families watching TV and eating together. There's less families sitting down and eating in restaurants, even if it's QSR. I remember plenty of times growing up sitting down in the dining room in a restaurant and having my fast food with my family. We have more and
yeah.
more movement towards hyper convenience, pure drive through, less dining at dining tables. What does that impact have as far as comfort as it pertains to dining for the younger generations? Is that totally different for them as it was to every single other generation before them?
Well, I can tell you it lends to safety because I know if we did something wrong, my father was cleaning his spoon and threatening us, so we had to run.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Bonk you on the head with
The
a
point,
spoon.
yeah. So it leads to safety for sure. I think that's a good thing. But no, no, you're right. And there's, the kind of activities, I felt, as our daughter was growing up, I mean, we were constantly on the road for her athletics and sports. And
Right.
and it's like, man, my parents there were five of us and we only had one.
Hmm.
I only had one child personally, but my siblings, there's five of us. And we seem to have managed it all within the same small town, right? Like
Hmm.
the spread and the competitiveness and being able to go. So we were always on the road with our daughter. But when I was growing up in a small town, you know, we were always home for dinner or supper, right? And
Hmm.
sat around the table together as a family. I mean, it was a given. That's just what you did. And
Yeah.
there were certain things on the table. There was always a stack
Sure.
of sliced white bread
Sure.
and a stick of butter to have alongside whatever meal that mom was putting out. So it's
Sure.
just, I think that's a Midwestern thing. I don't know.
No, we did that a lot too in
Yeah,
North Carolina growing up. We always had bread and butter at the table too. So no, I'm right there with you. Um, but yeah, it just makes you think, right? Like, what is the average way that kids nowadays, especially the younger generation,
yeah.
what do they associate with comfort in dining? Do they think of it being around a dining table? I mean, I'm sure some still do, but it
Mm,
seems like it's less and less common. I mean, I've talked to buddy of the show, Eric Stein
yeah,
of Churches,
yeah, yeah,
about the fact that one of my fondest memories that I still to this day have is picking up fried chicken with my dad from Church's Chicken in his pickup truck and eating fried okra and biscuits all the way home. Like,
yeah,
maybe there's something to be said about the fact that the setting doesn't really always change it, but it's just
yeah.
what people view as comfortable.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, the cell phone, as I hold up to the camera, is a changing factor. Younger and younger kids, it's a tool that is in everyone's hands now. It's not just adults. So, and now they can order. Parents are busy, they're working. They just say order Uber Eats or whatever carrying
Sure.
mechanism. So all of a sudden, kids are sitting around the TV or their computer doing homework. Click of a button and boom, 20 minutes later, it's at their doorstep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. The sort of social aspect is lost of ordering to a waitress or to a person or a waiter or waitress, or to a person. Now it's just you can do everything online. There's a totally different kind of lack of social interaction that's needed, and food just comes to you. And sometimes, even for kids, it's just eaten at a TV. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing that I suppose we'll see more of and understand to a bit of a deeper level.
yeah.
I think,
Well, the
love of
TV the
food
TV
doesn't
dinner has
change.
changed, right? I mean, it used to be Frozen Swanson's TV dinner, and that
Yeah, and
was
Hungry Man.
Hungry Man, yeah, and that was a big deal. And here
Hmm.
we are, 30, 40 years later, and it's no longer frozen; it's fresh, delivered hot, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so and you used to have to. I don't know, they used to have to plan for it, or you used to have to go to the store to get it and then put it into your oven. Now you don't even need that. So, or even creating nostalgic new twists on foods in an air fryer. I see convenience of appliances just as much as the phone being ways to assist and develop in that. Like I'm
Absolutely.
not an air fryer fanatic, but I really love the idea of what it does for preparation of food and the way it
Hmm.
makes it healthier for you in a lot of ways. You can still eat crispy foods that get that circulation, because not everyone's got a fan in their oven, convection ovens, right? So
Sure.
you know
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point, both in convenience as well as, what you have the capability to make now. It's a lot broader spectrum of what you can cook. And I mean, I think that opens the door for more flavors as well. We live in a more diverse world than we've ever lived in, with more food at our fingertips than we've ever had. And I think that that also opens the door for the fact that, 10 years from now, if not sooner than that, we'll also see even more global flavors be viewed as, those kind of classic comfort foods. More people will have had the access to, foods from their either country of origin, their
yeah
parents' country of origin, or just known for their heritage, to be able to have. And maybe we see an even more hyper prevalence of that in both food service as well as kind of retail.
yeah
Uh, it's an interesting thought, looking at the landscape
it's a
of
full
how we start
circle.
to package those different cuisines.
It's definitely a full circle. It's one of those moments where you can take from the past, know what you're doing right now in the present, and in the future you might just be eating what you had in the past in a different way.
Yeah,
And then
just more conveniently.
it's more generational too, right? And then
Yeah.
it's like you said, each younger generation that comes in, migrants
Mhm.
or just more influence on global
Mhm.
accessibility through the internet and seeing flavors. I mean, just the fact that we're seeing African flavors getting specific, very specific around what they
Mhm.
used to be, just like African flavors, very exotic sounding,
Yeah,
now,
or Asian
or
even,
Asian
right? Like,
flavors.
people
Yeah.
talk about the entire continent as if it's, one group of flavors, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's 30 some countries. You can't just boil it down to, a couple of dishes and say, yeah, that's Asian or that's African.
Mm-hmm.
And, to your point, that's an interesting point of it. It could become full circle where the younger generations feel more closely tied to the flavors of their, grandparents, because they've lived in a world where it's more globally available, and they grew up eating it more because they had it more conveniently than their parents before them did.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, that's a really interesting point, and even, the generations after that, hopefully, being more connected to that as well. So yeah, I think that it's an interesting time for availability and convenience in finding new ways to package heritage foods, heritage flavors, in a way that's never been done before, or
Yeah.
even just well-established things, whether it even be retail goods, in a totally new light, like we've talked about a bit earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think if we had to, kind of put a bow on it, in essence, people are looking for an emotional connection, right? There's
yes.
definitely a desire for that novelty piece, that kind of like,
Hmm.
I remember that kind of thing, that connection to the past. You know,
Hmm.
it needs to be marketed, right? Because we almost forgot about
Hmm.
Grandma McFlurry. Uh,
Yes.
there's
Can't do that.
a couple of them out there. You don't want to forget about it. Social media. What's the next platform, right? TikTok is right now pretty strong, and it's kind of taken over all the other platforms. So,
Hmm.
how are they going to be cooking and showing their latest treats and trends and things like that? And again, I've mentioned it a few times, but I think the health conscious consumer, as we learn more and more about, managing your blood sugars, right? And using certain ingredients to do that,
Yes.
rather than having to be dependent on medication for any of numerous things. Food is medicine,
Sure.
right? Food is medicine. And so I think incorporating those 4 or 5 things that I just mentioned is going to help us think about the future of innovation
Agreed.
and nostalgia.
I love it. Yeah, I think that you're dead on. Yeah, I don't have anything else really to say to that. I think that that's a good way to kind of tie it up, honestly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's really interesting, and I love the topic. But hey, we'd love to hear what our listeners have to think about. They want to talk about. they can certainly hit us up. There's a couple places you can reach us, right? choseobachain.com.
It sounded like you said a totally different name altogether. ChaseOpenchain.com.
You want it? Oh my God!
It was like you said Choseobachain.
I was trying to make it sound very, very authentic. Choseobachain.
ChaseOpenchain.com.
Okay. It's ChaseObenchain.com.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly how it's spelled is exactly how it sounds.
Yeah.
Find me there. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat.
Yeah, likewise. Foodtrendtranslator.com, and look us up on LinkedIn. You can find these episodes on any platform that you stream your favorite podcast on. And we're always looking forward to doing some more fun topics with you guys. Hey, Chase, I had a great time today. Love that we just had the chance for you and I to reconnect, and we'll have some more guests on, and probably next season, I think, when we'll do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna focus on. I think this is our second to last episode. Next episode, we're gonna do a little bit of a look back at how season 1 has gone, and we're gonna talk about what we've learned through our podcasting journey, and then we're gonna take a little bit of a break for the summer.
Perfect.
We're gonna enjoy the sun, enjoy the fun, enjoy the family, and yeah, we'll jump back in and have plenty of guests on the horizon in season 2. Hopefully, August or September. We're figuring that out.
Yeah. So cool. Sounds awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate it, everyone. Thank you so much. Chase, you've been a great co-host. We'll talk later.
Same to you, sir.
All right.
See you in the field.
See you in the field. Bye.